Hi there, it's Rosie here, and this is a free pelvic floor class. So, pelvic floor issues are not so much to do with a weakening of the pelvic floor muscles, but to do with the alignment of the pelvis and also to do with the length of the pelvic floor muscles. So, if muscles become shorter, become tighter over time, they become weaker, and they're not able to be as strong as they need to be. So with the pelvic floor, if they are too short, too tight, it makes a weak floor, and your pelvic organs cannot be supported. So in order to regain function to your pelvic floor, you have to concentrate on realigning the whole pelvis so the pelvic floor muscles can regain the length and the strength that they need to. So let's make a start. We first of all, I want you to think about the alignment of the pelvic floor, of the pelvis. So you've got three bones that you need to line up, and they are, if you pop your hands on your hips, you should feel two bony um, points just underneath your fingertips. These are your hip bones, your ASIS bones, your hip bones. You want to think about them being lined up with your pubic bone here. So you want to imagine that if you were laying down in some sand, that those 3 points would make marks in the sand. If you can feel that your pelvis is on the mostly pelvic floor issues are to do with a tucked under pelvis, which means your pelvic floor will come further forward than your ASIS bones. So you need to think about sticking out your bum almost to make sure that those 3 points come aligned with each other, and that's really important. It's not always as easy as that though, because if you've got tension in your thighs, in your back muscles, your psoas muscles, and you're weak in your glutes and your hamstrings, and tight in your quads, it's going to pull your pelvis out of alignment. So what we really need to work on is lengthening those short and tight muscles, releasing tension in chronically tight muscles, and strengthening the weak muscles so that your pelvis can come back into alignment and your pelvic floor muscles can lengthen and become more functioning. So let's make a start with sitting in a wide leg stance. Now, quite often when people sit, they tend to tuck their bum under. You can all see you've got a rounded back. Your thighs tend to ping off the floor, and you can see that quite easily your pubic bone is much further forward than your ASIS bone. So you want to come onto a half foam roller. Is really handy because it rolls you easily into position without you having to force it. If you haven't got one of these to hand, you can just grab a towel, like a little hand towel, roll that up and just put it under your sits bones, and you'll feel that automatically it just puts you into an aligned pelvic position. So that's important. You're not going to get any benefit from doing these exercises if you're not working on helping your pelvis to get in alignment as well. So sitting aligned, just take your legs into a V sit. And what we're thinking about here is stretching those inner thigh muscles. So a lot of the work we do in the pelvic floor program is observational, observing where you are, what's happening in your body, and then being able to, so one exercise can help you observe where you are, and then we can use that exercise to make corrections. So I want you to think first of all about where your feet are. Okay, are your feet sort of flopping in, flopping out? You really want them to be in a line with the rest of your legs. That just helps with creating balance and the right length of muscles all along your legs. If you can take your legs out a little bit further. If you can't, don't worry. And just think about slightly turning the thighs so that your knees and your feet all turn out to the back, and you can feel you've got an increased stretch here. So that's really simple, and you can do this exercise anytime you're sitting. I'm really big advocate of floor sitting, and this is one of the positions that you can take up when you're floor sitting, and you can use it when you're reading, texting, watching telly, anything really where you're staying in one position. Okay, now I want you to think about, imagine that you've got a hinge in your hips. It's going straight through. And I just want you to hinge from the hips a little bit forwards to the floor, just a fraction. You can feel that stretch and more stretch happening. So it's not, you're not rounding your back. You're not rounding your back to get the floor. You're hinging from here. So you're taking your whole, you're keeping your back nice and flat. And that just increases the stretch here a little bit more. That's nice. Okay, so now I want you to come onto your front. Move that out the way. And this is the point where I want you to think about those 3 points of the pelvis being on the floor. Just observe where yours are. Again, observation first, with no judgment, no worrying about thinking, being down on yourself because they're not there. This is observing where you are, and it helps you to work out why you're having the issues that you're having. Okay, so something that really pulls us out of alignment is walking and not being able to extend the hip backwards as you walk. So you end up creating quite a shuffling gait. It leaves you more liable for trips and falls, especially as you age. And what we tend to do is to put big signs up saying trip and fall hazard and try and make our paths as smooth as possible. Whereas if we work on being able to extend the hip back better without any other tension in the leg, then it means that we will be able to use the full range of motion of our feet, take good walking steps, and so be more balanced and more able to cope with rough and varied terrains. So what I want you to think about doing is just keeping in mind the 3 points of the pelvis. Just lift up your left leg behind you. Now, what I want you to think about as you're lifting that leg is, first of all, what's happening to the foot. Okay, if your foot is pointing up, so the sole's towards the sky, it's not really how you're going to walk. You want to think about keeping the toes pointed down towards the floor as you lift the leg. So have a go with that first. Next, I want you to think about, are you gripping with your bum as you move your leg? You should be able to extend the leg without gripping with the bum. So try it without gripping and just see how far you can go. This, again, no judgment. So your foot is with the toes pointing down and no gripping with the bum, and just have a play and see how far back, how far up you can lift your leg. So now we've assessed it, and now you know what you can start to work on. So let's try that with the other leg. So first of all, just lifting the leg up and down, seeing what's happening to those 3 bones that need to be making the imprint in the ground. Are you finding that your pelvis is rocking as you're lifting your leg? Are you finding that the pelvis on that side is lifting up as you lift the leg? Are you finding your feet are doing all kinds of things and your bum is gripping to help you? So come back down. Think about having the foot perpendicular to the ground. Don't clench the bum. And think about anchoring your pelvis into the ground as you lift your leg. Just see how much extension you've got there. And just be pleased with what you can get. This is your kind of benchmark to start with. You can work on where you're, this is where you're starting from. As you do the exercises more, as you build the strength, release the tension, this is going to get easier and easier for you. So let's go back to the left leg. Think about your foot position. Think about anchoring the pelvis into the ground. And think about keeping your bum relaxed as you lift and lower. Okay, go back to the right leg again. Okay, and rest there. Come on to your back now. Now you might want to grab some cushions. When we work on the back, what we want to always make sure is that we're bolstered again, so we're in an aligned position. And thinking about your rib and chest alignment, which again is an important point when you're working on your pelvic floor. If you tend to thrust your chest forward and create extra pressure on your lumbar spine, you're also creating downward pressure onto your pelvic floor. So we work a lot on shoulder and upper body mobility as well, but this lesson we're just working on observational and working on strengthening the hips so that you can create a better balanced pelvis. So you want to make sure that you are bolstered under your shoulders and your head so that your thighs can stay on the ground, and also so that your rib and the ASIS are in alignment here. You don't want your ribs sticking up further than these ASIS bones. So once you've got enough cushions and blankets to bolster yourself up like that, sometimes people find that they're bolstered almost to here, and that's absolutely fine. That's just where you are right now. It's just showing the tension you've got in your psoas muscles, which we can work on. So now bring your feet up close to your bum, so they're just a couple of inches from your bum. We're going to come into a mini bridge pose. But the way we get into it is thinking about using muscle strength to get us up there. So I want you to think about pushing your feet into the ground, and we're only going to come up a couple of inches, just a couple of inches. Now, it's important. I want you to feel the difference between pushing with your feet into the ground and bringing it and so your bum comes up off the ground, and thinking about pushing your tummy up to get up there. And you can feel that already as soon as you push your tummy up, you've got strain. You're creating pressure, inward pressure that pushes on your pelvic floor, and you're also putting extra pressure on your back and your knees. So come back down and push down with your feet so that your bum comes up a little way. Put your hands on your pelvis. You feel that it's flat, that the three bones are in line with each other. And now I just want you to take your left foot just a couple of inches off the ground and see what happens. Has your pelvis moved to compensate for that, or can you keep your pelvis straight? And then come back down. Now try the other leg. So you're pushing with your left leg, taking your right foot off the ground. Now what this emulates is the walking gait when you take one foot off the ground to put it in front of the other one. This is what the strength you need from your hips here. If you're finding finding that your pelvis moves as you take your foot off the ground, carry on doing it. Just you only need to do short bursts, because if you think about the steps, you're not holding that movement, that position for long, are you? You're just taking a step and a step. So if your pelvis is moving every step, you can imagine that's affecting your pelvic floor. And other parts of your body, but we're concentrating on the pelvic floor. So you want to work on stabilizing what's happening down here, so that you can lift off the floor and then balance on one leg and then the other leg, and keeping your pelvis aligned. So you might think that you need to tuck your bum under you slightly to hold it, or you might find that you need to lower your bum to the ground. Just experiment to see what's happening. Maybe one side of your pelvis is coming up, and you might just need to take it off, take the other foot off a fraction off the ground. Doing this exercise will build up the strength here. Okay, just rest for a minute. I want you to just have a think about another compensation sometimes for lack of strength in the hips is what's happening with the arms. So this time, when you take your leg off the ground, so come up, push down with your feet, come get your bottom a couple of inches off the ground. As you lift, as you push down with your left leg to lift your right leg, take your elbows off the ground as well. Just see whether you've been using your elbows to prop you up and to compensate for the lack of strength you've got in your hips. So move on to the right leg. And come back down again. Okay, rest there. I want to just take you through. So those that last exercise particularly is working on starting to strengthen your hips, and I just want to take you through one more exercise which will just start to create more strength here in the hips, just to finish. And this is a pelvic lift. This is about being able to move your pelvis in a controlled way to allow your foot to come forwards. So if you put your hands on, in order to get in a walking position, in order to bring your leg forwards, you can bend your knee and use your hip flexor to really drag your leg forwards. Now what that is going to do is obviously put pressure on your knee, because your knee's pulling your leg forward, but it's going to make your hip flex ache, but it's also going to pull on your pelvis. So every time you're walking forwards, it's pulling your pelvis under and shortening that pelvic floor. So instead, what you want to be doing is pushing down with the one leg, which in a controlled way brings your pelvis up, so that your foot can move forward, to swing forward. Then you've got the hip extension, and pushing down with this foot to enable this leg to come forwards. So in order to create that controlled movement, we don't want the kind of, sachet walk, which is really putting our pelvis too far out of alignment. It needs to be a controlled lift, so taking it a little bit further than what we were doing on the bridge pose, and pushing your left leg down into so hands on your hips, push your left foot down into the ground, push it right down, and you should feel that your right leg becomes lighter. Your right side of your pelvis is moved up slightly, but can you feel it's in a controlled way, rather than you kind of hoiking it up from your back and your side? It's the powers all come from your hip. So now do that on the right hand side. And you might find that if you haven't got much power here yet, that your foot is only just kind of lifting so slightly, it's not even coming off the mat, but you can feel, if you had both your feet on some scales, you can feel that one scale would register a heavier weight than the other. So with the right leg pushed down, you feel the left side of your pelvis coming up slightly, and so there's less weight on your left leg. And this is what it's all about. Your pelvis does need to be able to move and be mobile, but it needs to do it in such a way that it's controlled, and the power is coming from the muscles around the pelvis, rather than, it can be so easy to use your body to make space for your legs to move, or you can be like really dropping your hips down to move your legs, which is just creating compression and further weakness and soreness on the back. So this is kind of just really getting down to the finer movements of walking. And if you think how many walking steps a day you take and how many you need to take, if you're forever pulling your pelvis out of alignment, or you're causing strain on your back with every movement you take, you're never going to be able to regain that function in your pelvic floor. So these exercises are really important. So let's just try that pelvic list a couple more times. So you're pushing your left leg down into the ground so that your right leg can move forward. Can you feel the power from it that you're using here? Okay, and then let's push your right leg down into the ground, and you can start to feel that this hip muscle is really working. And this is great because keep alternating legs. Again, you don't need to make this for long periods, it's just short periods, but this is going to be great to help strengthen the hip and put you at less chance of falls, and also less chance of breaking your hip. It'll strengthen the bone as well inside your hips. Excellent. Okay, so let's come back down to a V sit just to finish off with. See if you can take your legs a little bit wider. Hinge from the hips, taking the feet out so that you're really stretching the inside of the thighs. So you can see that there's quite a lot. I hope you can see why it's not all about Kegels in restoring function to your pelvic floor. Okay, bring the soles of your feet together to finish. Just allowing your knees to start to move towards the ground, and that it is a whole body what am I trying to say? You need to work on your whole body to improve the function of your pelvic floor. I mean, we've just touched a little bit on the hips today, but you also need to work on foot. Foot mobility is really important. Shoulders and back, in releasing tension there, so you're not putting pressure on your pelvic floor from your upper body position. Yeah, there's a lot to work on. This has just been like a really quick taster session. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's made some sense. Yeah, if you want to join the dive a lot deeper, then I have got the 12-week online course, which is available now. If you want to come and work with me in person, then the next course will be hopefully September. If they everything willing, we can get back to doing in-person classes. If you've got any questions, then please do message me or email me. All right, well, take care. Stay safe. Goodbye.